Welcome back to Reviews with Elaine, because I have opinions. And today's opinions will be about The Ersatz Elevator by Lemony Snicket. I remember when I first read these books when I was younger that this is the one that I think was the heaviest for me, the most weirdly depressing. And at the time, I wasn't even really sure why. And I've talked in a lot of my reviews about how all these books, I find them light, I find them cheerful, I find them playful, I find them funny, but I also find them sort of depressing in places. And I think I finally put my finger on why this one was so heavy for me. So The Ersatz Elevator is the 6th book in the series of unfortunate events, which means, yes, like usual, expect spoilers for book 1 through 5 in this review. Yes, I try to avoid spoilers for the book I'm talking about, but I find that especially further on in the series, it gets really hard to talk about books earlier, so I go ahead and let it be spoilery. So if you have not read up to book 5 and you want to, with no information, pause. Go read those books, and then come back. But in this one, we follow the Baudelaires to their new home with Esme and Jerome Squalor. Now, Jerome was friends with Baudelaire's mother, and it seems he had wanted to take the Baudelaire orphans in as soon as he heard they were orphaned. But his wife, Esme, would not take them in, because orphans were out at the moment. And Esme cares about pretty much nothing in the world as much as she cares about what's in and what's out. Like, her entire life revolves around wealth and what is cool. And Jerome just doesn't want to fight with anyone, especially not his wife. Now, on the surface, this new possible home really seems like the best yet for the kids. The Squalors are wealthy. Jerome seems to actually care about them. And he even makes sure that their lives are full of the things they love. Books for Klaus, a tool bench for Violet, and biteable toys for Sunny. But the children quickly realize that all these wonderful things are hollow. And the hollowest of them all may end up being the protection and the love of their guardian. Because, of course, Count Olaf is coming for the orphans, and once again, the Baudelaires will be on their own to protect themselves and hopefully save their friends. Okay, so yeah, I want to cover the bit that I, teased in the intro first, and that is, yeah, this is the one of these books that I think I find the heaviest. And I think the reason is Jerome. The kind yet ineffectual adult is a major staple of this series. Like, almost every book has at least one adult character who is kind, who seems really nice, but does absolutely nothing useful for the kids. But Jerome is a very special kind of kind, yet ineffectual. He's not powerless, he's not too optimistic to actually accomplish anything, he's not too anxious to accomplish anything. No, he's just non-confrontational. And he is abysmally non-confrontational. Like, it is his entire existence being non-confrontational. And it very quickly becomes abundantly clear that this is because he's not just a coward, he just doesn't really care about these things that he thinks he cares about. And he just doesn't see anything as worth fighting for. And why I find this so depressing is, yeah, I recognize myself in that. I absolutely despise confrontation too, and I have a deep, abiding fear that some of the times in my life when I've convinced myself something wasn't worth it, that nobody was going to listen to me if I was arguing, that what was happening was not that serious and I would make it worse by sticking my nose in, that one of those times, that maybe I was just lying to myself because I want to believe I'm a good person, but also don't like confrontation. And it makes me wonder, truthfully, do I care? And it's easy to see Jerome in this book thinking it doesn't matter that much if he avoids arguing with his wife by accepting the fact that she made reservations for a restaurant he does not like. Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah, of course, I agree with him. That doesn't matter so much. Maybe don't rock the boat. It doesn't matter. And if that's true, then it's easy to also see why Jerome then turns around and doesn't stand up for the kids when they desperately need him to, because he didn't want to fight. And the difference is, the second one does not just affect him, it affects someone else. And he is wrong to make that choice. He is so wrong, and it matters so much. And he decides to let his comfort outweigh these children's safety. And in the end, it makes it very clear that he does not really care about them. And I worry have I made that decision? Have I ever outweighed my comfort over someone else's safety? And I think that's also what's so brilliant about these books, because yeah, they are kids' books. They are for kids, and you can definitely see how they're helpful for kids. But they are also so helpful for adults to see all the different ways that adults can neglect children. It's not always as simple not feeding them or not loving them. There are dozens of different ways. You can see the toxic positivity, the bullying, the abject cruelty, but also the adultification and the simple not listening to them. All of these things are modeled in these books. And beyond just interactions with kids, adults like taking care of their children, this is also useful just as a human being. There's always going to be someone who is less powerful than you. There's always going to be someone who needs you to stand up for them. And these books hold a mirror up to you and say, which one are you? Are you the one that's not listening to them? And it shows how incredibly harmful it can be from the point of view of those affected. And if there's one lesson that every single one of these books has for an adult working with children, and for anyone in a position of power over anyone else, it's how important it is to listen to those less powerful than us, and to believe them. Those who are in danger are so much more likely to see through whatever disguise a threat is wearing, and so we should listen when we say, that will harm me. And it shows us that anyone who is saying, I know you've been harmed in the past, I know it's happened again and again, I know the system did not protect you, but you've got to stop seeing everything as a threat, that person is wrong. And yeah, these books are asking you to really have that moment, to really look at yourself, look at the people around you, and wonder, am I being useful? Am I helping? Or am I harming? And yeah, this book hit really hard for me on this particular reading. Also just because it is the year 2025 and stuff is happening. But this book hits from the perspective of the kids, helpless while they wait for news about whether their friends will be saved, all the while knowing that Olaf is coming for them next, knowing that everything put in place to protect them has failed and failed again and again, and they are still being told to just trust the adults and take care of, the adults will take care of them, it will be fine. But it also hits from the perspective of seeing myself in Jerome, willing to let bad shit happen to avoid conflict. It hit from the perspective of watching the stupidly rich waste money on things even when they don't really like it, and they know it's stupid, but they want to look cool, and they're ignoring people suffering around them to look cool. And even the fucking stairs hits perfectly as a metaphor right now. The flights and flights of stairs that they walk up every day, up and down, just because someone decided that elevators aren't cool. But all the while, it's pretty clear that the elevator is out not because it's actually uncool, but because if it was working, someone might notice the trap built into the structure of the icon of wealth. And like, yeah, the themes of this book just hit like a brick wall at this exact moment. But I should talk about other things too. Let's see. The book is full of biting humor, like all of them are, and I love the style of humor of the series of unfortunate events, the silliness of the repeated words, the use of redundancy, but also the use of in your face, the use of reversals. There's a lot of really good humor in these books. One of my favorite lines is on page 45, and it reads, "Don't talk nonsense," as May said crossly. "If we give money to poor people, then they won't be poor anymore." And that's the kind of humor that really works well for me. It is just stupid, but so perfectly on the nose that I have to laugh out loud and then immediately wonder if I should be crying instead. There's also the utterly ridiculous kind of humor here. Things like a baby climbing an elevator shaft by shifting one tooth up above the other over and over again like a snake. The image in your head is just so weird, it is actively funny. Though I will admit, this one does bother me a bit on a logical level. Like, I'm usually pretty good at ignoring physics in these books and just going, they're for kids, Elaine. Like, they don't need to be literally possible. Violet's inventions don't always need to logically make perfect sense. Yes, it does make sense that occasionally Sunny does things that there are no way that a baby could do. But this one... The idea of being able to heat iron in a normal kitchen oven and it still be hot enough to melt metal 3 hours later? It was just too far from anything I know of how the world works for me to ignore. And like, Violet, I love you. You're such a good character. Your ideas usually have some logic, even if they wouldn't really work. But this one... No, that's highly flawed. But on the note of characters, I really love the emotional journey we've gotten to at this point with the kids. By now, we do feel the heavy weight of despair in them, the full realization that they are on their own, that no matter what the adults are saying, they are not safe. Like, it is very clear how deep it has settled into their souls by this point. But also, we start getting the determination to not just survive, but help others as well. The transformation of them into heroes helps alleviate the weight of this book, and it sort of, give us faith in ourselves that we can help others even if we cannot help ourselves. Or at least we can try to. That is all really good. And I love the way that Esme was handled in this book. I would love to talk about her a little bit more in depth, but it would be pretty bad spoilers. So I'm just going to say I really appreciate how clear it was from the moment we meet her that she is not a kind, loving woman. But the one character I really want to talk to in isolation is the minion of the book. Olaf always has at least one of his acting troupe, one minion positioned somewhere around the Baudelaires to help fulfill their trap, whatever the plan is for that book, and usually they are a very obviously threatening presence. But this time, the minion's not. They're actually pretty kind and gentle with the children. And whether it's intentional or not, yes, this character reveals some of Olaf's secrets. And I love that, largely because I have read the rest of the series and I know how much nuance some of these random little minion characters are going to pick up across the entire series. But also, it's sort of a nice contrast when we have the ones who are supposed to be helping the children being so unhelpful to also have someone who is not supposed to be helping the children actually being pretty helpful. And it's just another one of those little bits of nuance in this series that feels like the series feels as subtle as a purple elephant sitting in the corner. Like, it feels so in your face, so simple, so straightforward. It feels like one of those that directly tells you everything. But there's so much subtle nuance hidden under that. Because it's so in your face, it gets away with sneaking a lot of sort of subtle things in. And if there's one thing that I've been continually surprised with on this reread of a series of unfortunate events, it's how much complexity exists under the simple, straightforward concept of bad things happening to smart, kind orphans. I will also say, though, the climax of this book was actually physically hard for me to get through. Because it is so obvious what's happening to me, and I don't know if that's because I'm an adult who has already read this series once before, or if it is supposed to be that obvious for the kids reading it. And I feel like it might supposed to be obvious to the kids as well, because, yeah, but just watching it and knowing what's happening when the Baudelaires are clearly not knowing what's happening, and watching everything fall apart around them hurt a lot more than it usually did. And like, to the point of, I will admit, I skimmed some of those pages because it actually was hurting my soul a little bit. I also really appreciate the buildup of small details that we've started to get that become important later on in the series. I've been tracking the path of this series in all my reviews from incredibly episodic to a continuing story. And yeah, the first 3 books feel like Monster of the Week episodes. They are individual things that, like, have very little connection to each other. But it's around book 4 or 5 that we start to see hints that there is a greater trajectory to this entire story. We see where it's going to go. We see that they're going to have a greater mystery to discover. And it's by books 6 and 7 that we start to really see a lot more of that continuous story actively happening in the story. And that's probably why they start getting a lot thicker by this point. There's just a lot more to cover. And I usually honestly hate it when series go from very simple and episodic to, continuing story. Like, I'm always one of those people that's like, I signed on for Monster of the Week episodes. I'm not here for a government-wide conspiracy. But I do think that Series of Unfortunate Events is a great series to look at to see how to make this work well. First of all, it's very clear from book one, when you go back and read the entire series, that yeah, there is setup for this greater story. We know it's coming. But also, the hints just build up slowly enough that when we do get the pivot, when we do get the change of, the basic structure of the plots, it feels right. If anything, it's sort of become something we're craving already, because there's so much, despair. There's so much lack of the orphans' ability to do anything that we really want them to step out of the bubble and try something else. So yeah, unlike usual when I'm going, can we please go back to the episodic story? In this series, I'm like, can we please finish the episodic section so I can get to the overarching story section? And yeah, there is a lot of screaming at the book at this point, like, oh my god, kids, leave already. Mr. Poe is not helping you. But yeah, I will say I'm always impressed when I sit down to write the reviews of these books, because usually by the time I'm in a book like 6 of a series, I have nothing left to say about it. I've talked about the characters, I've talked about the world, I've talked about the plot, I've talked about the style of writing, I've talked about, the tone, and I just have no idea what else to talk about. And usually by that point I've even covered most of the themes, so it's sort of just checking in with each thing, being like, yeah, characters still good, themes still interesting. And I always feel like I'm getting a bit repetitive. But these, I don't feel it nearly as much. Almost every single one has given me something completely new to talk about. And there's just a lot of nuance in these silly little books. They are definitely worth reading, though I personally strongly encourage you not to read them all in one sitting. Like, don't read one after another, because I guarantee you there will be one of them that hits you too hard, that feels just a little bit of a downer. But overall, yeah, this is a great book, and I'm gonna see if I can find something a bit more cheerful to read afterwards. I want a little bit of escapism. Just a little bit.